they're so beautiful.
I heard Marty Cardinal from
Yeah.
love, joy, hope, courage.
That's a
justice.
big one. Yeah. So lovely. It's so expressive of our church. I don't know how in the world she ever found them. Oh, I love the love one. He reminds me of finding love in this church. And what, 8.5 years ago, I met Jim here, and we got married here, and this is a very romantic church. But I love them all, of course.
Hello, my name is Greg Rosasco, and it is my privilege to welcome you to our virtual service. We are pleased to have our new minister, Reverend Kristina Spaude, with us today. Before I tell you a bit more about us, let me encourage you to check our website at uutarpon.org to find the many programs and gatherings we offer to everyone, whether you are a member or just visiting with us. Perhaps the best way to introduce us is to say who we are, what we do, and how we go about it. Our mission statement addresses the who and what as follows. We are a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts. We go about this as a covenantal community. The words of our covenant are, we strive to look for and encourage the best in each other as we move towards justice, peace, and love for both ourselves and the world. And when we fall short, we will seek understanding, reconciliation, and a return to covenant. Now let us begin our service with a chalice lighting and the words of Eric Walker Wickstrom. Here, today, in this place and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear, may we hear so that we can feel, may we feel so that we can know, and may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way. Bonnie?
Carry the flame of peace and love forever in your heart. Carry the flame of peace and love forever in your heart. Reverend Christina will now give us our story for all ages.
Our story today is called The Treehouse Rules. The treehouse was built on the congregation's grounds over 3 Saturdays in September, using donated lumber and the donated labor of the families who attended the church and other adults who wanted to help with the project. Even the kids got involved, especially those ages 10 and up, by pitching in and helping in any way they could during the construction. And it was a fantastic place to be once it was completed, with a window that faced the nearby playground, a rope ladder to climb up, and a slide to exit. While everyone was happy that the treehouse was there after all the planning and construction, it soon became a problem. when too many kids wanted to enjoy it all at once, their different ideas about how to use it came into conflict with each other. The younger kids got a thrill out of running races through it, hurriedly climbing up the rope ladder, rushing through the treehouse to race down the slide over and over again, one after the other. But the older kids wanted to hang out in the treehouse after the worship service ended, playing games like jacks and cards. One day, a second grader racing by interrupted the fifth grader's game of cards for the third time. That was it. A fight broke out with name calling, pushing, and some tears. Some adults demanded that the treehouse be off limits until the children learned to cooperate with each other. Other adults protested that their children had special rights to use the treehouse because they had helped to build it. The Religious Education Committee had meetings about a policy for use of the treehouse. They were getting ready to report to the congregation's board of directors with their findings. Meanwhile, the minister considered bringing in a consultant from the district to address the conflict, which had now spread through the entire congregation. But while the adults were arguing, holding meetings, and creating policies, something happened. The children who had been temporarily banned from the treehouse started talking to each other and looking for ways that they could all use the playhouse together. A few of them remembered the covenants that they had created in their religious education programs the year before. They suggested a covenant could be created for how the kids could use the treehouse. So they sat down and talked about why they liked the treehouse and what made it fun. They discovered ways they could all enjoy their treehouse in the way they wanted to. They came up with a covenant which laid out how they would be in the treehouse and how they would respect others who were also using the space. Just as the adults were starting a congregational meeting to adopt a policy for use of the treehouse, some church leaders looked out the window. They saw the children cooperating with each other and using the treehouse without conflict. A teenager was dispatched to the treehouse to discover what rules the participants had come up with. And when she reported back to the adults in the congregational meeting, the announcement came that the participants had created a covenant with each other. The adults were humbled. Some sheepishly glanced at their church covenant, framed on the wall, hanging there, and mostly forgotten. The congregational meeting was adjourned. The adults went on their way, reminded of the power of covenants, working together to find a solution, and the commitment of people in right relationship with one another, all because of the treehouse rules.
We are one human family, one earth community, a common destiny for all. We are one human family, one earth community, a common destiny for all. We are one human family, one earth community, a common destiny for all.
Let's enjoy some words of inspiration from Reverend Christina.
Our words today come from Leslie Takahashi. This is Marginal Wisdom. They teach us to read in black and white. Truth is this, the rest false. You are whole or broken. Who you love is acceptable or not. Life tells its truth in many hues. We are taught to think in either or, to believe the teachings of Jesus or Buddha, to believe in human potential or a power beyond a single will. I am broken or I am powerful. Life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both and of and. We are taught to see in absolutes, good versus evil, male versus female, old versus young, gay versus straight. Let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities. The day is coming when all will know that the rainbow world is more gorgeous than monochrome, that a river of identities can ebb and flow over the static, stubborn rocks in its course, that the margins hold the center.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. All the music that I'm doing today, all the songs are by Unitarian Universalist composers, and most of them fall into the collections of books and songs that we have in the denomination. And this one is called Come Into the Light by Nancy Wendlandt. Come into the light, there's a place for you here, and you'll be all right with your friends gathered near. Reach up for the heights, there is wisdom in the air. Come into the light, let your heart lead you there. We're a family of free thinkers. We won't tell you who to be, because the secrets of the universe are for each of us to see. You're a gemstone of creation. We accept you as you are. Take our hands and we'll soar with you as you dance upon your star. Come into the light. There's a place for you here, and you'll be all right with your friends gathered near. Reach up for the heights. There is wisdom in the air. Come into the light. Let your heart lead you there. Share your gifts, they are a treasure. We will handle them with care. And when life becomes a burden, lean on us and we'll be there. If your soul is brimming over with the best that life can bring, draw your light into our circle, and together we will sing. Come into the light. There's a place for you here. We'll be all right with your friends gathered near. Reach up for the heights. There is wisdom in the air. Come into the light. Let your heart lead you there. It's time for our offering for the work and welfare of this church. Please look for us at the website uutarpon.org and click on that donate button, or send your checks to 57 Reed Street. The entire address is right there on your screen. And thank you. From you I receive, to you I give, and together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, and together we share, and from this we live. Reverend Christina will now give us our message for the day.
Jersey Universalist Church was once a thriving religious community, recounts the Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie, historian, professor, and Unitarian Universalist minister. As with many of our Universalist congregations across the more rural parts of the Midwest, it flourished with the message of universal salvation in the 19th and into the 20th centuries. But come the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961, Jersey Universalists opted not to become contaminated by the Unitarian heresy, as Ritchie says, and they continued into the 1990s and beyond as Universalists, being served faithfully by their Universalist minister until he died. Because the overwhelming majority of Unitarian and Universalist congregations did elect to be part of the Unitarian Universalist Association, there were no longer purely Universalist ministers to choose their next minister from, following their longtime minister's death. And so the Jersey Universalist Church returned to an old Universalist custom and ordained lay leaders from the congregation to serve as their ministers. A quick refresher on Universalism. Like Unitarianism in some ways, Universalism is considered a heresy of Christianity and is distinctly U.S. American. Hosea Ballou, considered by many to be our first Universalist theologian, wrote in his A Treatise on Atonement that a truly loving God would want humans to be happy, and also that God would not condemn any of humanity to eternal damnation. We are all God's children after all, and God loves us, no matter how dirtied we might become in our humanly living. Surely such love would have tenderness for us all. So the Jersey Universalist Church was ordaining lay ministers, and this seemed to serve the congregation well for a while. We know this because Reverend Ritchie serves a nearby congregation and would call to check in on them periodically, sharing the good word of our faith with them, as they were not in relationship with any other congregation, having not joined the UUA or any related organizations. The congregation continued to be cared for, as was the building they met in. They did care for each other. But somehow over time, around the fourth or fifth lay minister that was ordained from within, something had become lost to the congregation. And of all the somethings, it was the message of universalism that was lost. Not only was it lost, but somehow the message had become completely flipped. The lay minister there had begun preaching a doctrine of hell and damnation. The congregation has since closed. Now, looking further back in Unitarian Universalist history, it wouldn't be wrong to be surprised that Unitarian Universalists draw the cornerstone of our faith from the Pilgrims, who were religious separatists, and the Puritans, who were religious non-separatists. Both wanted reform of the church, but chose to address it differently. The Pilgrims rejected professions of faith like the Nicene Creed, a Trinitarian statement of faith, not only because it was Trinitarian, but because it was a creed. And the Pilgrims affirmed religious tolerance, refusing to persecute Quakers as the Puritans had, and maintaining a 40-year peace pact with the Wampanoag peoples. Both the Pilgrims and the Puritans rejected hierarchical church authority, believing in each congregation's right to self-governance by the vote of its members. The Puritans were so insistent that each congregation be governed by its own members that after some years of discussion, they signed the Cambridge Platform in 1648. This was the doctrine that first laid out how congregations should be constituted and work. Our congregations work within the frame of congregational polity, essentially a fancy term for covenants for congregations. And especially as Unitarianism spread from Massachusetts and then New England, sometimes they were really bad at this. Actually, we're still usually really bad at this. However, for our founders, the autonomy of each congregation did not imply either self-sufficiency or isolation from other congregations. In fact, they were to be a community of independent churches, giving and taking counsel and helping each other in other ways. This is where the idea of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Member Congregations came from. So congregations make covenants together, and individual members of congregations make covenants together. That's another part of the heritage from the Cambridge Platform, the forming of churches around covenants. Covenants are a commitment and aspiration to work and be together in religious community. As a pluralistic faith that draws people from many traditions, covenants are what help us as Unitarian Universalists navigate our differences. They are living texts, not statements of faith or doctrines, but words that must be lived into and, when broken, must be returned to in reconciliation, just as written in this congregation's covenant. We strive to look for and encourage the best in each other as we move toward justice, peace, and love for both ourselves and the world. And when we fall short, we will seek understanding, reconciliation, and a return to covenant. Joining a church means covenanting to journey with your neighbors, other members, in spiritual growth. The Blake Covenant, used by many congregations, goes, "Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another." Love is the foundation of the work to be done within and among us. We commit to mutual learning and teaching and challenging and growing. We commit to supporting and serving our community. At our best, we commit to allowing the margins to hold the center by identifying the margins and holding them. As the world has become more obviously challenging to some of us in the last 10 or so years, for some, especially during this current administration, our call as Unitarian Universalists has in some ways sharpened and been challenged, both from within and without. And who we are matters to how we respond to these challenges. It's not just congregations and individuals who struggle with living into covenants. Our ministers do as well. During the 2019 General Assembly, one minister from Washington, who I decline to name or refer to as a colleague, self-published a book whose title I decline to share. The book is full of racism, sexism, transphobia, ableism, and generally disregard for those who are marginalized. The book was freely handed out from a booth at General Assembly. Given its sensational and toxic histories and theologies, the minister was quickly told how concerning and harmful his work was to many who were present at General Assembly, including those to whom the book had deliberately been given. This minister then declined to engage in conversation with individuals, with representatives of the General Assembly, or any group, including our Ministers Association, any who attempted to talk with him. And he also declined to agree to be in right relationship with the gathered community. And so he was not allowed to return, but not until a lot of damage had been done. The damage rippled throughout Unitarian Universalism. Those like this minister who do not support our faith's move to address white supremacy culture in the wider world and now within our own faith feel more justified and emboldened by the publishing of this work and the backlash it has largely gotten from Unitarian Universalists. A well-known writer and chaplain, a minister I also decline to name or refer to as a colleague, whose work helped me recognize my call to ministry, has supported the minister who wrote that book, and Stoking the Fire challenged Unitarian Universalists to answer the question, am I still a Unitarian Universalist minister? While this may not seem important in general to our laity, I believe it is because this is who we are, and how your ministers agree to be in relationship is reflective of our shared values and ethics, as well as both our history and our visions for the future, and the way we dream for not only ourselves, but our congregants to be in relationship with each other. And so I can only answer the question, given the information I shared with you earlier. that our faith has been defined by covenant. And thus the short answer to her question is no. Ministry is many things, but easy is not one of them. There are reasons why some ministers do some things and others don't. Some ministers choose not to go into fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association, and I appreciate that. Whether a minister has done this, there are 2 collegial organizations that ministers can join specifically for ministers. This allows ministers to be recognized as colleagues and to be in covenant with each other. The covenant of our relationships is laid out in guidelines, and all members of either of these organizations are bound by their respective covenants. Breaking of covenant has consequences, and we are working to be better about reconciling. Ordination by a Unitarian Universalist congregation does make a person a minister, but it does not make them a Unitarian Universalist minister. This goes for professional or lay ministers, a fact demonstrated clearly earlier by the Jersey Universalist Church I mentioned at the beginning of this sermon. What does matter is the relationships and specifically the covenants we keep. This is so important to our Ministers Association that while I was a community minister these last 2 years, I was obligated to maintain a good standing, to be affiliated with a congregation. I would have anyway because I love our congregations, but it's a requirement for community ministers to be in right relationship with and to be accountable, not only to our colleagues, but also our shared faith. It matters whose we are. A hallmark of being a member of a religious community is practicing the faith with others. Religion cannot happen alone. Spirituality can, of course, but not religion, and certainly not ours. As a people who have rejected creeds or other statements of faith for at least a few generations, there is nothing that binds us as Unitarian Universalists other than our covenants. Although some Christian faiths engage in covenanting, Unitarian Universalists are rather unique in that covenants are how we define ourselves. No creeds, no doctrines, no statements of faith are asked of us. Covenants are how we know both who we are and who we want to be. Those who do not covenant with us simply are not Unitarian Universalists. Covenants are brilliant and can be powerful tools as they are based in mutual relationship and not hierarchy. The book that was published and handed out at the 2019 General Assembly was deeply damaging to many, to members of that minister's congregation, to the people the book was given to at General Assembly, to friends and colleagues of mine who are trans and non-binary and queer, anti-racist, women, disabled, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And beyond the damage created by this book, further damage was done when people expressed their hurt and the author declined or refused to engage in conversation with any of them about the damage done. He refused to be held accountable or to return to covenant. This happened repeatedly. It's the adult equivalent of saying, "I'm taking my marbles and going home." It's not relational. Adding to this, the book makes arguments in the name of logic and reason. We white liberals value our intelligence and believe in the value of logic and reason. And I have learned this to be an expression of white supremacy culture. The book was written as a reaction to the work that Unitarian Universalists have been engaging in, especially hard the last few years, to address white supremacy culture within ourselves and our institutions. The book was just the kind of thing many of us are working to grow away from. The book was a blatant refusal to engage in this anti-white supremacy work, followed by a blatant refusal to engage in any way in the practice that is the heart of our faith. Unitarian Universalism cannot work when individuals refuse to be in a relationship where the individuals, or congregations for that matter, refuse to communicate with each other, to be accountable, to be in covenant. We do not ask for things to go perfectly, only that we continue to try. And this is critically important for those who have the power in a dynamic. Why all this matters is because, in Leslie Takahashi's words, the margins hold the center. When we cannot be accountable to each other, even to those in the center of power, how can we possibly be accountable to those who are at the margins of power? If we cannot be accountable to the margins, the center cannot hold. Maybe when you were young, you remember throwing a tarp in the air, balls bouncing on top of it. Without a strong hold on the edges of the tarp, the whole thing will get loose and collapse. Working at the margins shows us where we need to grow to get closer to who we want to be, shows us the work that needs to be done, shows us the way forward, and shows us where we are failing. The margins are where our faith has the most promise to bring us closer to the beloved kingdom we seek. And it is at the margins that we recognize where the bounds of Unitarian Universalism are, and how we know the work that we yet need to do to become the people that we want to be. We are a people that moves ever forward to answer the call of justice here on earth, the only place we can be sure justice is possible. Calling on our Unitarian forebears who believed earnestly in the promise of human potential for good, in the depth of that promise, the being of that promise. And on our Universalist forebears too, who believed as earnestly in the promise of human equity, in the breadth of that promise, and the doing of that promise. We are called ever forward by their visions for our faith, even as we live into them differently than they might have. This is their legacy. It is our heritage and our covenant with the past, present, and future. We cannot live into this covenant when we leave those who have been marginalized behind in favor of those who refuse to be held accountable, who refuse to be in right relationship, who refuse to live into the dreams promised to us that justice shall one day roll down and we will be part of it, so long as we do the work together. Indeed, this is the only way it can be done.
Final hymn is We'll Build a Land. We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like water, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like water, and peace like Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where the oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build the land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like water, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Our closing words come from Reverend Christina.
These words come from Jean Harrison Newyar and the gift of faith. In the lore of ancient China, there is a story of a philosopher who was asked, "Where is the road called hope?" He replied, "It does not exist, but as people journey together on it, it comes into being." I invite you to continue journeying on that road with me.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere